I'm joined by Luke Hopper of Beverage-Air, and we are here to fill you in on everything R-290. For those with questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A section of the webinar panel, and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. We know you guys are busy, so we want to respect your time and keep this to 30 minutes. And for time allowing, we'll get those questions answered. If we do not answer your question during the webinar, please follow up with Luke. There'll be an email address at the end of the webinar that you can address those questions to, and we'll take care of you from there. With all that said, I'm going to turn it over to Luke and get this party started. Thanks.
Good morning, guys. Hope everybody's got their coffee. We're going to zip through this, but try not to go too fast. Once again, my name is Luke, and let's go ahead and get this started. Oh, there we go. All right, so the purpose of this is not so much to certify you to work on R-290. We're making you aware of what R-290, mainly the differences between R-290, 134, and 404. Just things that will help you identify R-290, some safety concerns, and just really what the differences are. The more you're comfortable with it, the easier it is for us to ask you to, do some warranty work for us. It helps you in the field to move along with your service calls in a more timely fashion. But let's go ahead and get started. So that's Eric at the top. That is me at the bottom. Great picture. Okay, so basic facts about R-290. Only refrigerant-grade R-290 is to be used when servicing hydrocarbon systems. Standard propane does not meet the purity content needed for an R-290 refrigeration system, and R-290 does not have an odor additive like standard propane does. Most of you should be familiar with what normal propane smells like. It's got the sulfur additive put in, and it kind of smells like rotten eggs. This has no odor. There is a maximum charge amount of 150 grams, or the more common 5.3 ounces of R-290 in any refrigeration system per the EPA. So that's very important to note. So the largest refrigeration system you will find will only have 5.3 ounces. Now, I know you may be thinking about a 3-door unit. There's no way 5.3 ounces is doing that, and that is correct. It will have 2 separate refrigeration systems that have no more than 5.3 ounces each. Do not oversize the filter dryer. I know lots of times in the field, if you have to do a repair, you have a contaminated system, you'll put a larger filter dryer on it to try to pull more out of it, kind of as a safety net. You really want to avoid doing that with the R-290 system, mainly because if you have a larger R-290 system, you're going to have to adjust your charge, and it's probably going to put it over that 5.3 ounces. Smaller factory charge equals smaller hoses. The smaller the better. We would like you not to exceed 12-inch hoses, so the little stubby hoses work the best. It's just easier to get a good accurate charge, and you don't have any waste. These R-290 canisters only come in like 14-ounce jugs, so it's a lot different than the big 404, so you don't have as much to work with. Standard leak detectors will not pick up R-290. Combustible leak detector or R-290, only leak detector will be needed. You do not have to recover R-290. It can be released into the atmosphere in a well-ventilated area. So what this means is if you are in a kitchen and it's ventilated, you do not have to drag your recovery machine in there. You don't have to roll the unit out to recover it. You can just bleed it off. Really want to avoid doing this if you have a open flame nearby, but it's not, it would have to be directly over top of the unit for it to actually affect it. Keep in mind this is just 5.3 ounces, and it's going to come out as a vapor, and it's going to dissipate very quickly. 134A or 404A cabinets cannot be converted to R-290. We get that question probably once a week. People trying to get with the times, but they just want to replace the refrigeration system and not the cabinet. That is not an option. Labeling. So here's some of the ways that you can identify R-290 system. Obviously on the data tag, it's going to show what type of refrigerant it has. It's going to show your charge amount. It's always going to be shown in ounces. Generally, as far as Beverage-Air goes, it's always going to have this HC. If you look at the illustration to the right, you'll see the model. HF1HC, HC stands for hydrocarbon. And if you're familiar with Beverage-Air model numbers, if you take that HC out, that is the previous model number. So essentially all we've done is just added HC to that model number. The compressor will always have this big green sticker on it that says R-290, always. We will not have a compressor or R-290 compressor leave the factory that does not have this R-290 sticker on it. The discharge and suction tubes will have red plastic sleeves on them per UL 471. These red plastic sleeves are there to indicate that these are your access ports. So this is where you're going to put on your saddle valves, and this is also where you're going to pinch them off once you're done. So these are your suction and discharge. And then on the back of the unit, you're going to have this R-290 placard. It's about 2 by 2, bright yellow. You can't miss it. So what's the difference between R-290 and 134A and 404? Well, for starters, R-290 is extremely flammable. Service valves cannot be left on R-290 equipment. No more than 5.3 ounces in any single refrigeration system. And most of you are well aware that you can have well more than 5.3 ounces in a 134 or 404 system. R-290 can be used for both medium and low temp applications. Traditionally, 134 is your medium temp and 404 is your low temp. R-290 cannot be used in remote systems. This once again goes back to the 5.3 ounce limit. No open contact electrical components can be used with R-290. We'll have some examples coming up here in a second, but open contacts have the potential to create an arc which could ignite any residual R-290. Servicing an R-290 system. Some of these here's some examples of some spark-free components. On the bottom left, that's essentially just a fancy wire nut. Wago lever connections, and it's really just a fancy wire nut. Danfoss and Aliwell controls, what you see pictured here is a Danfoss control. These are R-290 approved digital controllers. And the closed contact fan motor. This is traditionally used as an evaporator fan motor. We do have a closed contact condenser motor as well. Tools required. Small hoses, R-290 tank adapter, crimping tool, combustible leak detector, and flammable warning placard. So R-290 systems will always be sealed from the factory. So at the start, you're going to remove the red sleeves covering the service lines, add on your service valves, generally saddle valves, to the suction line and discharge line securely. Ensure there are no leaks around the service valves. If you have a combustible leak detector, you should have it on and monitoring close to the work area to pick up any potential leaks. And this is an example of a combustible leak detector in use during a repair. So this is actually an R-290 leak detector. Combustible leak detectors differ a little bit. They have, and you can use these, but they generally don't have the audible buzz, so you generally have to know your propane parts per million to actually be able to do that calculation, but they can be used. This one is just a standard refrigerant leak detector. It'll scream at you when you've got a leak and tell you how severe it is. Continuing, if you are in a well-ventilated area, you may vent the R-290. Locate your leak or faulty refrigeration component and repair accordingly. During the repair, purge the refrigerant lines with around 3 psi of dry nitrogen. That's the preferred method. Do I expect every technician to carry around a 50-pound jug of nitrogen and purge a 27-inch refrigerator? No. If you want to do it by the book, this is the way to do it. But given the amount of R-290 and most of the times the limited workspace that you have available to you, if you're not gonna do a step, that would be the one. But that's coming from a tech, and I've been in the field and I know how much of a pain it is to drag around a big jug of nitrogen. Check for leaks once the repair is complete and pull into a minimum 500 micron vacuum. I emphasize minimum. That is the minimum industry standard. Personally, I generally like to pull them down to about 350, and if you have changed the oil in your vacuum pump within the last decade, you should be able to do that on these smaller systems. Recharge the system using short hoses and a digital scale. Add the factory charge on the data plate to the high side only. You'll see some temperatures there in parentheses. So 134A boils at negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and R-290 boils at negative 43. That's the difference in what we're dealing with as far as the refrigerant. So R-290 is a lot colder. You really want to avoid dumping that straight in as a liquid onto the head of the compressor. Once that's done, use a crimping tool. Crimp in front of each saddle valve. Now, when I say crimp in front of the saddle valve, that is between the saddle valve and the component. So don't crimp on the other side of the saddle valve. I have run into this where somebody has crimped on the wrong side of the saddle valve and cut it and just wasted about an hour and a half, because then they just had to start all over. So just keep that in mind. While the crimping tool is still locked in place, check for leaks at the end, then seal with torch and solder. Generally, I would say, I do not have to say this, but you really want to stay away from soft solder. That is 100% for plumbing, not for this type of copper, not for high pressure application. Safety. The flammable warning placard needs to be in place before tapping the system. There should be no open flames near the system during service. This includes the grills on top of chef bases. So, gone are the days where the guy's standing above you while you're working on the unit and working an open flame, especially if you're trying to get into the refrigeration system. And I know you guys hate that. The power must be disconnected before tapping into the system. This is purely safety. Keep in mind, this is an odorless refrigerant. It does not have much refrigerant, but it will scare the crap out of you. Some safety information. We've got links here to pretty much all the legal standards for R-290, the R-290 safety data sheet. And we also have a Alley Group safety and standards pictured here to the right. So I know I kind of blasted through this. So we've got plenty of time for questions. So let's open it up. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I see. We do have R-290 kits that we send out. Most of your larger retailers, Heritage included, and especially, have R-290 at their physical locations. But if you are in a remote location and you do need an R-290 kit, we will definitely send that out for you. I also see a question, what scales do you use to measure the charge, and do you sell a kit for the repair? So yes, we do sell a kit. There is an R-290 tank charging scales. Those are available. We do not supply those. You can use a standard scale, digital scale set. You just have to be very delicate with it because, once again, this is just a 14-ounce cylinder. So it's, yes, charge vapor only just because the charge is so small. So it's going to pull that vapor in extremely quickly. And you can charge as a liquid. There's no regulation stating that you can't. Charging as a vapor is just more exact when you're dealing with such a small charge. If you're actually using the charging scales and you have a full tank, it needs to be noted that it is going to go in as a liquid because the charging scales sit sideways, and the tank is a tall cylinder. If you've ever seen a 20-ounce CO2 canister, that's essentially what you're dealing with. LP, it's a different type of propane. So R-290 is propane in essentially its purest form. LP is generally used for heating purposes, cooking. So that's generally used for residential cooking purposes. R-290 is not used for either of those. Yes, you do use a torch to seal the system, or we use a torch to seal the system as well from the factory. So we don't just do the crimp, we also, we do the crimp and then we seal the tips. What do the scales read? They read in ounces, but I think you can make them read whatever you want. I mean, you can get those scales, you can purchase them online. Local parts suppliers should be able to purchase them for you or order them for you. As far as the R-290 kit, generally those are sent out. So if we were to issue you a warranty call, you can purchase an R-290 kit from us, but if we were to send you out on a warranty call and you tell us ahead of time, I am R-290, I'm ready to go out and service R-290, but I do not have a kit, we would preemptively send that kit out to you. So the start components are sealed. So no longer will you see the old school start components where it's got the coiled copper wire around the start relay. So the start components, and depending on the size of the compressor, would actually be separate from the compressor on in a separate box. No, you do not need a special vacuum pump to evacuate the system. It's still POE oil. Filter dryers are R-290 rated. So it needs to be R-290 specified on the filter dryer. POE oil is used in the compressors. Normal operating pressures, we'll just stick with the refrigerators for right now. Normal operating pressures generally hovers around between 30 and 40, depending on what type of system you're dealing with, on the suction, and about 160, 180 on the head pressure. Low temp's actually pretty similar to 404A pressures. Generally want to see in negative 15 evaporator coil, negative 20 evaporator coil. That's gonna park you at about 15 psi on the suction and about 200 on the head. Hoses, I mean, as short as you can get them. The most common length for yellow jacket hoses or any hoses in general is going to be 12 as the shortest one. So 12 works. Yes, we're still using cap tubes, but only in refrigerators. All freezers have expansion valves.
So we have about 10 more minutes left, so we're still open to taking questions. Oh, there we go.
Yes, to do warranty work for us, and to work on Beverage-Air equipment, we ask that, and we can't say certified because we're not a certifying body, but we do have a quiz that we're going to send out that you can download. I think we're doing a download, right? Okay. So you'll be able to download the quiz. You're going to email that quiz back to the email provided, and that's it. So you will actually be able to download the entire presentation that you just saw, plus the quiz, and I think it's a 10, 11 question quiz. Answer that. If you pass the quiz, we'll get you on the list, send you back your results, and you will be available to work on R-290 through us, or R-290 Beverage-Air equipment, rather. Discharge temp and for 134 is going to be similar. You're going to be looking at about 165, 170. The waxing, so clogged cat tubes is not as big as an issue with R-290 it was 134. It's still POE oil, but it's a different blend. And whatever this blend in, it does not, when we've got high, a system failure, high head pressure, it doesn't boil it off. I'm not familiar with what Bright 8 is, Bill. Discharge can get up to 200, mainly in low temps though. It will exceed 200, in certain applications. Obviously, the hotter the kitchen is, the higher your head pressure is going to be. I mean, we will be checking the answers, but it's not going to, we'll be actually doing the certification or checking your answers. This is not going to certify you, so this is not an EPA related thing. This is more of a familiarity. You do not need any special DOT placards on your truck to carry this. You're carrying a 14-ounce jug of propane, so that would mean that you would have to have a placard on your car every time you went camping. Yeah, Stay Bright soft solder, 8% would be fine. We've had a couple of units go out that have had leaks on the tips, but our process is machined, so it's very hard for one to get out the door through us. Especially, I mean, it goes through quality as well. Operating pressures for medium temp between 30 and 40 psi on the suction, and 160 to 180 on the head. Low temp, you're going to be between 10 and 20, and 200 to 220-ish on the head pressure. Subcode 3 and 1s, as long as it's got sealed contacts, I'm not against it, especially as a temporary measure to get a customer up and running. But we really would like to go back with the factory stuff if we can. But 3 and 1, as long as it's sealed, as long as the contacts on the top of the capacitor are sealed, that's no problem. And yes, all manufacturers are going to be required to go to R-290 eventually. Most refrigerators on our end have already been transferred over to R-290. Some of the larger ones are an exception. Freezers are well underway. Half of our freezers are R-290 now, and most of the other major manufacturers have to follow the same template. No problem.
Yeah, we've got about just a couple more minutes left. Luke, do you want to talk a little bit more about the quiz so they understand what the process is and everything?
Yeah, so when you download the quiz, just fill it out. There will be an email provided. I think it's servicedealers@alley.refna. Send your answers back. Now keep in mind, this is an open book test, so you get to download the presentation, then you can go back, look at the presentation, look at the questions. Now, there is one tidbit that I don't think I touched on. So, most of our systems, most of our 48-inch horizontal units, 27-inch horizontal units, have less than 3 ounces of propane in them. That's 3 ounces total. So if you were to go to your local convenience store and buy a medium-sized butane lighter, you're purchasing something with more liquid propane in it, with more liquid butane, propane. They're similar enough. So you would be able to purchase something that has more than 3 ounces of propane in a liquid capacity than is actually in this system. So just keep that in mind. So we don't want you smoking in front of the unit or lighting up, but it's, at best, you're going to get your eyebrows rearranged and just be extremely embarrassed. Leak checking a system that is flat, you can put just a small amount of trace R-290 in it. I've actually seen techs in the field go with putting 134A in the system and leak checking it that way if it's completely flat. You have to pull a very extensive vacuum after you do that, but that is acceptable since the POE oils are so similar. The old school method, obviously, just put 200 PSI on it and soap bubble until you either hear something or see the bubbles. Now, ice machines, you're gonna have to hit Scotsman up with that one because I'm not familiar with them. I try to stay in my lane as much as possible. The most leaks on our systems generally come from copper that's not been secured, rubbed lines. We've had some evaporator coil leaks, bad spot leaks from the manufacturer. Ultrasonic leaks, I have heard good things. Europeans actually went with the carbon dioxide refrigerant. I think it's R600. And for whatever reason, we decided to go with R290. That's over my pay grade.
Well, everyone, this was great. A lot of good information. As Luke mentioned, the presentation as well as the test will be available to you to download after the webinar, and we'll also actually have the webinar available to listen to again. We have recorded it, so we'll post that link for everybody as well to download. We know you guys are busy, so thanks for your time. Thanks for the great answers, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.